Hi, my name's Merrick Hale. 3 weeks ago, I opened a patient file at work and saw my mother's name. I thought it was a mistake until I read the guardian's signature. It was my sister's. That was the moment I knew they'd buried her alive in paperwork, doped her up, locked her away, just to steal the house and split the money. What they didn't know? I worked at that nursing home. And when I showed up at her room, she couldn't speak, but her eyes told me everything. How do you forgive your own blood for selling out the woman who gave them life? The clock above my desk read 6:45 p.m. when the last patient folder of the day slid across my desk. The hum of the overhead lights blended with the low murmur of the night shift nurses outside the glass partition. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and burnt coffee. Familiar, almost comforting. I told myself I'd go home after this file. Just one more. I tapped the keyboard, half watching the cursor blink. Name, Evelyn Hale. My fingers froze. The room didn't feel the same anymore. I blinked once, twice, thinking I'd misread it. But there it was, black letters on a pale blue screen. My mother's name. For a moment I couldn't hear the hum anymore. Just my heartbeat and the soft creak of my chair. I scrolled down the form, the cursor jumping line by line. The Guardian section. That's where it hit. Guardian, Lucinda Rowe, my sister. The signature, crisp and perfect, looped in her usual elegant flourish. The date, yesterday. My mouth went dry. The emergency contact list appeared next. My brother Ray's name, a number I hadn't dialed in months. My name, nowhere. Not as next of kin, not even a footnote. I leaned back, the plastic chair squeaking beneath me. Maybe it was a clerical mistake. Maybe Mom had chosen this. She was getting older, confused sometimes. Maybe Lucinda was helping. Maybe. But I knew better. My sister didn't do help. She did control, and she never missed a chance to remind me who really mattered in this family. I looked at that signature again, the ink slightly darker where she pressed the pen too long on the curve of the L. My chest tightened, a strange mix of disbelief and recognition. This wasn't sudden. It had been coming for years. Ever since Dad died and the house turned into something to be claimed instead of shared. I reached for my coffee mug and found it empty. My hand trembled slightly as I set it down. Outside, the sunset had given up. The sky was all gray now, the kind of gray that made you feel you'd missed something important while you were busy pretending everything was fine. I thought about all the dinners where I sat at the end of the table, quietly eating while Lucinda and Ray talked over me. About the birthdays they forgot, the jokes about little brother still finding himself. I'd swallowed those moments whole, told myself family was family. Now it was just paperwork. Legal forms where love went to die. I stared at the line where my name should have been. It wasn't just missing. It had been erased. My phone buzzed. The caller ID said Lucinda. I hesitated before picking up. Merrick, hey, just calling to let you know everything's settled, she said, her tone bright, practiced. We found a nice place for Mom. Quiet, clean, professional. You'd approve. Lucinda, I said slowly. You put her here. There was a small laugh. Oh, come on. We didn't put her anywhere. We're making sure she's comfortable. You understand, right? You've always been compassionate. I clenched my jaw. You drugged her, didn't you? A pause. I could hear her exhale through the phone. Don't start, Merrick. You wouldn't understand what responsibility feels like. That one landed. Hard. I felt it in my stomach first, then up my spine. Responsibility. She said it like I'd never carried any. Like working double shifts to cover Mom's bills didn't count because I wasn't the one holding the pen on the legal papers. You could have called me, I said quietly. You knew where I was. I figured you'd overreact, she replied. Besides, you've always been emotional about her. Emotional, I repeated. That's what you call it. There was no reply this time, just the faint background sound of her life continuing somewhere far from mine. Voices, laughter, the clink of a wine glass. Good night, Merrick, she finally said, and hung up before I could speak again. The silence afterward was heavier than before. I stared at the phone until the screen went black. My reflection looked back at me, tired and hollow. They hadn't just forgotten me. They'd rewritten the story so I was never in it. I turned back to the intake file. The page glowed under the fluorescent light. The signature looked almost smug. My fingers brushed the paper, and I noticed a small round brown stain near the corner, a faint ring of dried coffee. Lucinda always left those, always. I whispered her name under my breath. Lucinda. The lights hummed again, louder this time, like a warning. I leaned back, breathing slow, thinking. I wasn't supposed to know she was here. But now that I did, I couldn't just file her away like another patient. Visiting hours were over, but the badge on my chest could open every door in this building. I looked once more at the paper, at the stain, at the signature that had erased me. Tonight, I was going to see my mother. I slipped my badge through the back entrance scanner just as the rain began its gentle tapping on the roof. The hallway lights flickered to life as I stepped in, one by one, triggered by motion sensors that always gave the place a haunted sort of rhythm. Golden Pines After Hours was a different world, quiet, almost sacred in its stillness. The scent of antiseptic mixed with something older, like dying flowers left too long in a vase. Kim, one of the night nurses, looked up from her tablet at the front desk and nodded. "Late paperwork again?" she asked without much interest. "Yeah," I murmured, not slowing down. She didn't press. Everyone here knew I had a habit of staying late, working overtime no one asked for. It gave me cover. Tonight, it gave me a reason to walk those halls with a purpose no one would question. Room 112 was at the far end of the south wing, past the recreation area and 2 doors down from the quiet TV lounge, where an old man sat watching a silent infomercial with his head tilted like he was trying to remember something important. I moved quietly, letting my shoes brush gently across the linoleum floor. When I reached room 112, I saw it immediately. The nameplate. It was crooked, not just tilted, but wrong. Evelyn Hale, not Hale. My jaw tightened as I stared at it. The letters were printed neatly in black on a white strip, the plastic cover clipped on lazily. I reached up and straightened it with my thumb, holding it there for a second too long. The wrong name stared back at me. "It's Hale, not Hale," I whispered. The hallway light clicked off behind me, plunging me into partial shadow. I didn't move. For a split second, I could almost hear her voice, the way she used to say it when I was a boy fixing bent picture frames in our hallway. "Always fix what's crooked, Merrick." I opened the door. The soft lamp by the bed was on, casting a warm but weak glow over the room. She was lying there, smaller than I remembered. Evelyn Hale, my mother. Her white hair was slightly matted on one side, her eyes cloudy but open. When she saw me, something shifted behind her gaze. "Merrick?" she said, her voice scratchy. "You work here?" I pulled the chair closer to her bedside. "Yeah, Mom. Been here a while now." Her hand moved weakly toward mine. I took it, skin thin as paper. I could feel the tremble in her fingers, even through the sedation. Her eyes searched my face like she was trying to make sense of it all. I adjusted the blanket over her shoulder. That's when I noticed it. Her wrist was bare. The gold bracelet, my dad's last gift to her, was gone. "Where's your bracelet?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. She blinked slowly. "Your sister said it needed cleaning." Of course she did. I looked over at the nightstand, opened the drawer, empty. No Bible, no reading glasses, just a folded paper. I picked it up. Standard medication log. At the bottom, in neat cursive, it read, "Administered by L. Rowe." I folded it back and slid it into my pocket. I didn't say anything for a long moment. Neither did she. The silence was its own kind of truth. I studied the lines on her face, the subtle bruising at the edge of her elbow. I'd seen too many seniors come in here drugged up just enough to be compliant. "You didn't want to come here, did you?" I asked gently. She turned her head slightly. "I thought we were going to lunch. Lucinda said it was just lunch." There it was, my breath caught. I knew that tactic. I've seen it used too many times by families who didn't want a scene. You take the parent out for lunch, and they never go home again. My fists clenched, nails biting into my palm. "They didn't let me say goodbye to my house," she whispered. Her voice cracked, and I reached for her hand again, squeezing gently. "You will go home again," I said. "I'll make sure of it." She smiled faintly, drifting back into that dazed place where time didn't hold shape. I stayed for a little while longer, watching her chest rise and fall, then stood. I needed answers, and I needed them from someone who'd actually seen what happened. On my way out, I passed Kim again at the desk. She looked up, her brow knitting slightly. "You were in 112, weren't you?" I nodded. She glanced around and lowered her voice. "She came in yesterday crying. Seemed disoriented. I don't think she knew what she was signing." My breath hitched. "You sure?" Kim nodded. "She kept asking for you." I stared at the wall behind her, where a framed inspirational quote hung crooked. "Of course." "She looked scared," Kim added. "But your sister, she was all business. I don't like that one. Something about her makes my skin itch." I exhaled slowly, trying to keep my face calm. I thanked her and walked back down the hall. As I passed room 112 again, I looked at the nameplate. It had tilted again. I stared at it a moment, then whispered, "I'll fix what's crooked, Mom. I promise." Then I reached up and straightened it once more. But as I turned to leave, the light flickered above me, and I swear I saw the plate tilt again, just slightly, like something didn't want it to stay straight. I walked out of the nursing home into the early morning drizzle, the kind that made everything look like it belonged to someone else's memory. My knuckles still ached from clenching my fists too long. The rain coated the windshield as I drove, the wipers brushing it away in slow, tired arcs. Lucinda lived 15 miles away in Walnut Creek, tucked in a neighborhood where every lawn looked like it had its own gardener, and every porch smelled like money. It was just past 9 a.m. when I pulled up. Her house, a 2-story colonial with spotless windows and fake seasonal wreaths, looked exactly like the kind of place where the truth came wrapped in throw pillows and matching dish towels. Before I could knock, the door opened. She stood there holding a mug of coffee, already dressed in a crisp blouse and pearls like it was part of her daily uniform. "You look tired," she said, her tone lined with something smug. "Still working those long nights at the home?" I stepped inside without answering. The scent of lemon polish hit me first, sharp and artificial. The floors gleamed like a showroom. "Want coffee?" she asked, already turning toward the kitchen. "I'm good," I said, eyes catching on a framed photo on the hallway wall. It was Mom, years younger, smiling wide next to Lucinda in front of the old family house, the one they sold without telling me, the one Mom had lived in since before I was born. I followed her into the kitchen. The place looked more like a catalog than somewhere a real person cooked. Too clean, too cold. "I saw Mom's paperwork last night," I said. "Thought I'd check if everything was in order." Lucinda didn't flinch. She leaned on the counter, sipping from her mug. "It's all legal. I had to do what's best for her." By sedating her and signing her name on a POA transfer? Her mug stopped midair. "Excuse me?" I kept my voice even. "You heard me." She set the mug down a little harder than necessary. "What are you accusing me of, Merrick?" I reached into my coat and pulled out 2 papers. One was the guardianship form I'd copied at work. The other was an old Christmas card she sent me a few years back. One she signed by hand, back when she still remembered to pretend we were close. I laid them side by side on the granite countertop. "Your R loops clockwise here," I said, pointing at the card. "But on this form, it curves the other way." Lucinda stared at them for a beat too long. Her face didn't move, but I caught the smallest twitch at the corner of her mouth. "You're being paranoid," she said. "No," I replied calmly. "I'm being observant." Footsteps sounded behind us. Ray. He walked in carrying a box labeled "Donation" in black marker. When he saw me, he froze just enough to make it obvious. "Hey, let's not do this here," he muttered. "You knew," I said to him. Ray looked down at the floor. "She said Mom wouldn't remember anyway." Lucinda shot him a glare so sharp I almost felt it myself. "That's enough, Ray." I took a step closer. "You two drugged her to get her out of the house, to erase me from the paperwork, all so you could cash in and split the sale." Lucinda straightened, that fake calm returning. "You were always the dramatic one. You think you can save her from herself? She's slipping, Merrick. You just don't want to admit it." I shook my head. "No. You don't want to remember what it means to take care of someone who once wiped your tears, cleaned your cuts, packed your lunches. You forgot what it means to show up when it matters." Silence. Ray stepped back into the hall like he wanted to disappear. Lucinda's eyes were steel. As I turned to leave, something on the fridge caught my eye. A recipe card, yellowed, faded ink, curling edges. My mother's handwriting. I'd know it anywhere. "Read carefully before you sign," it said in her neat cursive. I stared at it too long. Lucinda noticed. She snatched it off the fridge like it burned her fingers. "You've got no right to judge me," she hissed. "Maybe not," I said, walking past her, "but Mom does." The front door clicked shut behind me. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt something sharper, certain that the next signature Lucinda forged would be the one that took her down. I didn't go home after leaving Lucinda's. I drove aimlessly for a while, letting the silence fill the car like fog. At some point, I ended up parked behind the nursing home, watching as the building slept behind drawn curtains. My badge still hung from the rearview mirror. I turned off the engine and sat there until the sky turned a soft, muddy gray. At 5:12 a.m., I swiped myself in through the side entrance. The corridors were still and cold, humming with the kind of silence only places like this could produce. The lights above flickered to life one by one as I walked through the hallway, my footsteps clicking too loudly against the tile. I didn't see anyone. Most of the night staff had gone home, and the early shift hadn't started yet. Perfect. I made my way toward the records room. My supervisor wouldn't be in for another 2 hours. If I was going to find something, this was the time. Inside, the air smelled of toner and antiseptic. The old printer in the corner ticked like a nervous heartbeat. I logged in using the backup admin credentials I wasn't supposed to know. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a second before I started typing. I searched for my mother's intake file first, pulled it up, double-checked her medication chart, and then I saw it. Lorazepam. The dosage was off. Way off. 4 times the standard amount, administered the day she was transferred. The signature next to the approval? L. Rowe. I stared at that one line for a long time. Guardian consent provided. It was clinical, cold, clean. It was also criminal. I printed the page, tucked it into my jacket, and moved on. Next stop. Security archive. I opened the database where all surveillance footage was stored. Each day had a thumbnail, an image captured from the hallway cameras every few minutes. But one day had nothing. No images. No clips. The day my mother arrived. Access denied. I tried again, this time using the internal backup system. Still nothing. The logs showed that the file had been wiped clean just after midnight the same day. No request ticket, no transfer log. Just gone. Somebody had covered their tracks. I leaned back in the chair, rubbing my face. The screen glowed in front of me, but all I could feel was a deep, crawling sense of sickness. This wasn't just about control anymore. This was erasure. The kind of thing people do when they don't expect anyone to look too closely. Early morning, I turned to see Nurse Kim in the doorway, a paper cup of coffee in her hand. Her eyebrows lifted when she saw what was on the monitor. "You're here early," she said again, slower this time. "Couldn't sleep," I replied. "Thought I'd get ahead on some files." She stepped inside, eyeing the open page. "That file's locked. How did you—" "Who erased the footage?" I asked quietly. Her mouth opened, then closed. "You shouldn't be looking at that," she said, glancing toward the door. "This could get you fired." "She's my mother." She took a breath, looked down, and then said, almost to herself, "Lucinda's on the board. She's close with the administrator. You don't know what you're walking into." "I do now," I said, sharper than I intended. Kim looked at me, her eyes not cold, but careful. "Merrick, just be smart." I've been quiet long enough. There was nothing left to say. I logged out, pushed back from the desk, and walked out of the room. The hallway felt colder, the lights harsher. Halfway to the exit, my phone buzzed. Voicemail. Lucinda. I didn't want to hear it. I already knew the tone, the words she'd used to dress up her control as concern. But my thumb hit play anyway. Her voice slid through the speaker like ice water. "Stop snooping. You're not on the paperwork for a reason." A pause. "And if you care about Mom's peace, you'll keep it that way." I stood there a moment, listening to the silence that followed. Then I deleted the message. Didn't listen to it again. Didn't need to. But her voice lingered anyway, like a thread caught in my skin, like static. The static of Lucinda's voice hadn't faded by morning. 2 days later, it was still there, woven into the back of my mind like a bad radio frequency I couldn't turn off. That's when I decided I'd had enough of whispers, enough of threats veiled in etiquette. It was time to go to the source. Mid-morning sunlight spread across the parking lot of the Walnut Creek Medical Plaza as I stepped out of my car. I stood for a moment, watching people in scrubs move in and out of the sliding glass doors, each carrying clipboards, coffee cups, or the weight of somebody else's family. I buttoned my jacket, tucked the folder under my arm, and walked into the building. Dr. Sandler's office was on the second floor, corner unit, polished wood door, frosted glass. I knocked once. Before I could knock again, it opened. "Merrick Hale," he greeted, smiling like I'd just donated to his alma mater. "I was expecting you." I stepped inside without shaking his hand. The room smelled faintly of mint and leather. Everything was curated, from the angled degree frames on the wall to the untouched stack of medical journals on the coffee table. "I appreciate you making time," I said flatly. "Of course," he replied smoothly. "It's not often family members show such dedication." He gestured to a chair. I sat, placing the folder on my lap. His desk was spotless, save for a small photo of a dog and a digital clock that ticked in perfect silence. "I understand your concerns about your mother's care," he began, adopting that practiced tone doctors use when they're bracing for confrontation while trying not to seem combative. "I assure you, everything has been within protocol. She's receiving sedatives," I cut in. "High doses." He folded his hands. "Prescribed to manage her disorientation. Not uncommon in geriatric transitions." I opened the folder slowly. "I work intake at Golden Pines. I see these forms every day." He watched me without blinking. "This," I said, sliding the photocopy across his desk, "is my mother's patient consent form. In this section here," I tapped the lower half. "It's not hers. It's not even from her file. It was copied from another patient's form, digitally. The scan artifacts are obvious if you look at the shadows behind the text." His eyes flicked to the page, then back to me. The smile wavered, not gone, but thinner. "That's a serious accusation," he said. "No," I replied calmly. "It's a fact." Silence expanded between us. The only sound was the gentle hum of the air conditioner above our heads. I reached into the folder again. "And this," I continued, "is a receipt for a $10,000 donation to this clinic from Lucinda Rowe, 1 week before the form was signed." His expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes shifted, like a gear catching. He leaned back, fingertips steepled. "You're walking into something you can't handle, Mr. Hale." "You're right," I said. "I'm walking into something you should have stopped." He exhaled through his nose, slow and deliberate. "Your sister wants what's best for your mother." "She wants control," I said, "and you let her buy it." There was no raised voice, no dramatic outburst, just two men in a quiet room, one of them holding too much truth, the other too many secrets. I stood. "We're done here." As I walked toward the door, I heard him say, almost offhandedly, "Be careful where you dig, Merrick. Not every grave was meant to be opened." I didn't answer. I just left. Outside, the sunlight was sharp but cold. I paused at the exit, staring at my reflection in the tinted glass. My face looked older than it did a week ago, eyes sunken, jaw tight. I barely recognized the man looking back. I could still hear Mom's voice, years ago, teaching me how to read the fine print on a cereal box just for practice. "Even love needs witnesses," she'd said, underlining the words on her old will. I walked to my car in silence, but my thoughts roared. Halfway to the driver's side, my phone buzzed. Text from Kim. "Check locker 18B in the staff lounge. Don't tell anyone." Attached was a blurry photo, an envelope worn at the edges, with my name on the front. The handwriting, shaky but unmistakable. Mom's. If her hands had written that before Lucinda's signatures began rewriting everything else, then maybe, just maybe, there was still one truth they hadn't erased yet. I gripped the phone tight. If Mom's handwriting was on that envelope, it meant one thing. She'd tried to warn me before they silenced her. The rain had settled into a steady rhythm by the time I parked behind Golden Pines. It was just before 11, the kind of hour when even guilt tries to sleep. Most of the windows were dark, except for the faint glow leaking from the nurse's station and the vending machine's eternal blink in the hallway. I slipped in through the side door, my key card still active from last week's overnight shift. The hallway smelled of antiseptic and linoleum warmed by machines, familiar in a way that didn't comfort me anymore. The staff lounge was dim, just like Nurse Kim had said. One flickering bulb overhead gave the whole room a tired, haunted feeling. A few chairs were scattered around, one of them still tucked under the table like someone had left in a hurry. I walked past the microwave, past the old bulletin board with yellowed flyers, and knelt beside locker 18B. The lock turned easily. Inside, under a worn stethoscope and an empty lunch container, was the envelope. Yellowed at the edges, sealed with a small sunflower sticker barely clinging, and on the front, in unmistakable, trembling cursive, for Merrick, if they let you read this. My fingers hovered for a second. I hadn't seen her handwriting in months. I hadn't even realized I missed it until now. I sat down right there on the floor, back against the metal lockers, and opened it carefully. The seal broke with a soft tear. Inside were 2 sheets, folded twice. Her handwriting shook across the page like each word was dragging itself through fog. If you're reading this, it means I didn't get to tell you goodbye my way. My throat tightened. I blinked once, twice. The pages swam. They said you were gone, that you sold the house, left me with nothing. Lucinda showed me papers. Ray nodded. I didn't know who to believe. They told me you were drowning in debt, that you were desperate, that I needed to protect myself from you. I didn't want to sign anything until I understood it. But they said there was no time, that I was confused, that it was better this way. I felt myself slipping. The pills came soon after. Too many, too strong. I tried to write this before it got worse. I love you. I know now. I knew even then, but I didn't fight hard enough. Read carefully before you sign, Merrick, and don't let them erase you too. I lowered the letter. The room didn't feel dim anymore. It felt hollow. The humming fridge buzzed louder now, like it was chewing the silence. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, and stared at the paper like it might start bleeding. She hadn't been confused. She'd been betrayed. Lied to, drugged, silenced. By them, by family. My breathing stayed slow, but my hands weren't as steady. I wasn't crying, not yet. The tears weren't ready. The grief hadn't decided what shape to take. Instead, memories came. Soft ones, like smoke. Me, 7 years old, at the kitchen table. Mom beside me, helping me trace the R in my name. Your name is your promise, Merrick, she'd said. Never let anyone change it. The memory punched harder now. My name, my presence, my place in her life. They'd tried to erase all of it. No, they hadn't tried. They had. And still, she'd found a way to leave this. I folded the letter back along its creases, placed it gently in my jacket pocket, and finally stood. On the break room table was a mug, pale blue, chipped near the handle. I recognized it immediately. It used to sit by her armchair at home, filled with chamomile tea every evening after Jeopardy. Someone had tried to fix it with gold glue. The repair line shimmered faintly under the flickering bulb. I ran a finger along the crack. She was telling me something. Not just in words, but in all the ways she'd lived. Quiet strength, patched dignity, broken pieces put back together, but never hidden. "You warned me in every way you could, didn't you?" I whispered. My phone buzzed. I pulled it from my pocket. "Unknown number. If you want proof, meet me by the garden gate tomorrow. Noon." That was it. No name, no context. Just the garden gate. I stared at it for a long minute. If this was a trap, I'd walk into it anyway. If it was help, then it meant I wasn't the only one still listening for the truth. I turned off the light as I left the lounge. The rain had quieted some, but not stopped. The hallway welcomed me back with its usual hush. As I passed the vending machine, I glanced down at the cup again, still visible through the open door's window. The golden crack shone like a wound that had learned how to heal out loud. And I decided I wouldn't hide either. I didn't sleep much that night. The letter replayed in my head like a scratched record, Mom's voice folding into memory and ink. By morning, I'd already made up my mind. I packed the letter in a Ziploc bag, slipped it into the inside pocket of my coat, and drove to the nursing home an hour early. Parked in the back, I waited. The rain had stopped, but the sky still carried its weight, thick and heavy, as if it hadn't made up its mind yet. The grass in the garden glistened with leftover dew, and the air smelled faintly of mud and eucalyptus. Noon approached, slow and loud in my chest. I stood by the back gate, an old metal thing half-eaten by rust. It overlooked a shallow creek that only ran after storms. That day, it murmured like it remembered something it couldn't forget. A shadow moved near the hedge line. "You're late," came a voice, sharp, hushed. I turned. Nurse Kim, hair pulled back, hood up, eyes darting like she expected the ground to open up. She stepped out from behind the hedge, one hand clutching her coat closed, the other holding something wrapped in tissue paper. She didn't smile. Neither did I. She pressed the bundle into my hand. "It's all in there," she said quietly. "Emails, logs, bank stuff. You didn't get it from me." The tissue crinkled as I opened it just enough to see a small USB stick. Plain, unlabeled. I looked up. "Why now?" She swallowed. "Because she trusted me. Your mom said you'd figure it out." The air felt colder despite the sun peeking through the clouds. I nodded once. "Thank you." She nodded back, but didn't step away. Her face twitched like there was something still stuck behind her teeth. "There's more," she said finally, voice almost a whisper. "Lucinda paid me." I froze. Kim looked down, ashamed. "Not to hurt your mom, not directly, just to keep you out of it." I stepped back, slowly. "What do you mean, keep me out?" "She said you were unstable. Said you'd get in the way. That the stress would make things worse for your mother. That she just needed time to figure things out." She paused, face pale. "And I needed the job." I stared at her like I was seeing her for the first time. "You helped her erase me." "I didn't know what she'd do," Kim said, voice cracking. "I thought she was just trying to keep peace. I swear, Merrick, I didn't think." "That's the thing," I cut in. "You didn't think. You didn't ask. You just went along." She flinched. "I'm not proud of it." "No one ever is," I said. "But they still do it." The wind stirred. Mist blew through the gate, carrying the scent of wet earth and distant lavender. Kim wiped at her eyes roughly with her sleeve. "You sound just like her," she murmured. I stared at her for a beat. Then maybe she should have listened. I turned without waiting for an answer. 10 steps away, my phone vibrated. I stopped. Unknown number. "Walk away, Merrick. You won't survive this fight." I looked back at Kim. She had her arms wrapped around herself now. small and folded, as if bracing for something more than just weather. "She knows," she said, barely audible. "She always knows." I looked down at the phone, thumb hovering over the screen, and then I lifted my eyes to the gate, still half open, swinging just slightly in the breeze, a border between silence and sound. I walked back, reached for the gate, and slowly pushed it closed. The metal groaned, reluctant, before the latch caught with a solid, final click. "Not this time," I said under my breath. The click echoed in the stillness like a verdict. By the time I got home, the rain had followed me. It came in short, angry bursts against the window pane, the kind that sound like someone knocking, then changing their mind. My apartment was dark except for the faint blue glow from the laptop screen on the kitchen table. I hadn't bothered to turn on any other lights. The USB sat in front of me like a tiny, silent witness. I plugged it in. The screen flickered once before opening the folders. Dates, numbers, PDF files, email strings, each one colder than the last. The paper trail of how my mother's care had become a business transaction. Then I saw it. A file named Transfer Conf MP3. I clicked, static. Then a voice. Lucinda's, smooth, deliberate. "She'll sign whatever you put in front of her once the meds kick in. Just make it look humane." There was a pause. Then another voice. Dr. Sandler's, tired, detached. "This isn't care, Lucinda. It's liquidation." Lucinda's soft laugh followed, light as perfume, but sharp enough to cut through bone. "It's family business, doctor. Don't make it personal." The file ended abruptly. I sat there staring at the frozen audio wave on the screen, heart pounding slow and heavy. I replayed it once, then again. Each time the words bit deeper. Liquidation. That's what they'd called it. Not sedation, not treatment. Just liquidation. I leaned back, running my hand over my face. The air felt too thick to breathe. Then came the knock. 3 short raps on the door. I froze. Another knock, harder this time. When I opened the door, Lucinda stood there, her trench coat soaked through, hair slick from the rain, and not a trace of apology on her face. She looked at me like I was a mess she was tired of cleaning up. "You always overplay your hand, Merrick," she said coolly. "That's why Dad never trusted you." I didn't move. "You mean the way you trust forged signatures and sedatives?" Her eyes flicked past me, to the laptop on the table. "So you found it? Cute." She stepped inside without waiting for permission. "You think that'll save you? You stole medical records. That's a felony. So is drugging your own mother." Her lips tightened, but she didn't flinch. "You have no idea what you're walking into. I already filed a restraining order. By this time tomorrow, you'll be the violent son who broke into a facility and harassed staff. The police will eat that story alive." I looked her dead in the eye. "Mom already knows." For the first time, her confidence cracked. A blink. A slight tremor in her voice when she said, "What are you talking about?" "She left me a letter," I said softly. "In her handwriting, before you silenced her." Lucinda's expression hardened again, the momentary slip sealed under that polished mask she always wore. "You think you can threaten me with some sentimental note?" she said. "You've always been dramatic. You don't even realize you're destroying what's left of this family. That family ended the day you sold Mom's trust for a check." Before she could reply, a new voice came from the doorway. "She's lying." We both turned. Ray stood there, rain dripping from his coat, hair plastered to his forehead. He looked exhausted, not from the weather, but from years of pretending he didn't see what was happening. Ray, Lucinda hissed, you shouldn't be here. He ignored her. I'm done covering for you. I stared at him. You knew. He nodded, eyes red. Kim sent me the backups before she disappeared. Every file, every payment, every signed order. It's all there. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a flash drive, placing it on the table beside the laptop. Lucinda's face drained of color. You idiot. No, Ray snapped, louder than I'd ever heard him. You did this. You forged her name. You turned Mom into a paycheck. The room went still. Lucinda tried to speak, but nothing came out. I stepped closer to her, slow and steady. You poisoned her for convenience, I said, and you thought you could bury it under paperwork. Her mouth twisted into something that wasn't quite a smile. You think this is justice? It's family suicide. I shook my head. No, it's resurrection. I pulled out my phone and dialed. Her expression didn't change until she heard me say the words out loud. This is Merrick Hale. I need to report a case of elder abuse and medical fraud. Lucinda's eyes went cold. You won't win. Maybe not, I said, but at least the truth won't drown with her. The police arrived faster than I expected. She didn't resist, not in front of them. She stood straight, chin high, as if arrest was just another negotiation she planned to control later. But for the first time, she wasn't calling the shots. After they led her out, I stood at the window, watching the red and blue lights fade into the distance. The rain had stopped completely. The world looked cleaner but quieter, like it was holding its breath. I turned back to the table. The USB was still there, glowing faintly under the laptop's light. Beside it, I placed my mother's letter, the one she wrote in that shaky but defiant hand. Her words came back to me, soft but clear. Read carefully before you sign. I touched the edge of the page and whispered, I did, Mom. The reflection in the glass looked back at me. Tired, yes, but steady. Not broken anymore. The truth was finally out, but freedom always comes with a price. Tomorrow, I'd find out what mine was. 3 days passed. Not loud, not quiet, just still. I'd spent most of that time staring at the ceramic cup on my kitchen table. The gold seam still held, catching light like a scar that had earned the right to stay. That morning, I wrapped it in a towel and tucked it into a shoebox. No need for anything fancy. She'd always said, what matters isn't the box, it's what you carry in it. By the time I pulled into the Golden Pines parking lot, the rain had long gone, replaced by a soft California sun peeking through gauzy clouds. The building looked the same, but not to me. Not anymore. Inside, the halls were warmer somehow. Not temperature, feeling. The scent of lavender lingered faintly, mixing with something nostalgic I couldn't quite name. Down the corridor, a piano played an old tune, slow and gentle. I recognized it instantly. Mom used to hum it when flipping pancakes on Sunday mornings. I passed the nurse's desk. Kim was there, sorting a tray of meds with quiet precision. She didn't say anything, but when our eyes met, she gave the smallest nod. The kind of gesture you carry in your chest long after it's over. I nodded back. Mom was by the window in her room, wrapped in a knitted cardigan I didn't recognize, but it suited her. Pale blue. She looked smaller than before, but her eyes met mine, clear, aware. You found me again, she said, voice thin but warm. You were never lost. I walked in, set the box down gently on the table, and pulled a chair close. She noticed the box, smiled. That from the house? In a way. I opened it, lifting the cup out carefully. The gold seam glinted in the sunlight, streaming through the curtains. She reached for it with both hands, like it was something sacred. "You fixed it," she murmured. I nodded. "You taught me how." She turned it over slowly, fingers tracing the crack. "Funny how the broken part's the most beautiful now." We sat in silence for a few minutes, not the awkward kind, the kind that sits with you like a friend. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for my cheek. I leaned in. "They told me you were angry," she said. I was. She didn't flinch, just waited. "I thought you believed them," I continued. "I thought you forgot who I was." Her lips pressed together, eyes softening. "The truth has a way of outliving all of us." I pulled her letter from my pocket, the one with the sunflower sticker, faded and creased. I didn't read all of it aloud, just the last lines, the ones I knew she'd want to hear again. Her eyes closed. A tear slid down the side of her face. "Then I did something right," she whispered. Just then, the door clicked open. Ray stood there, hesitant, hat in hand. He looked older than I remembered, not by years, but by weight. "They said I could come in for a minute," he said quietly. I didn't move, just looked at him, not with bitterness, but with the kind of compassion that only comes when you finally let go of the fight. "You came," I said. "Yeah," he replied. "It's time to own what we broke." He stepped in, unfolding a document from his coat pocket and placing it on the small table between us. "She deserves this," he said. I glanced at it. It was the deed, signed, notarized, everything in place. The house was legally back in Mom's name. I looked at Ray. "So did you." He didn't answer, but I saw something shift in him. Maybe not redemption, but the first step toward it. Mom's hand reached for the cup again. She lifted it slowly, eyes studying the seam. "You know, Merrick," she said, voice steady, "when something cracks, you don't hide the gold. You let it show." I nodded. "That's what makes it real." Outside the window, the garden gate creaked, that familiar sound that once made my stomach twist. But today, it was just the wind moving through, soft and harmless. We sat there a while longer. No rush, no pretending. Eventually, I stood to leave. I bent down, kissed her forehead gently. She looked up, her eyes shining. "You didn't raise a fool, Mom," I said. "Just a slow learner." She smiled. "Slow is steady, and steady gets home." As I walked down the hallway, the piano tune drifted again. Same melody, but it sounded lighter now. I passed Nurse Kim on the way out. She didn't speak, but she didn't need to. Some people save lives without ever being seen doing it. Outside, the sunlight spilled across the pavement, lighting up the old gate like it was something brand new. Fully open now. I stopped, looked back once more, then kept walking. Some stories don't end with justice. They end with peace. The world doesn't remember who shouted the loudest, only who stood their ground when it mattered. And this time, I did.